Well, we'll go ahead and get started, and if people join us, we'll just let them jump in.
Yeah, sounds good.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Amy Osetinsky. I'm one of the instructional designers here at CU Online. Thanks for joining us today for course mapping. Jason Drysdale here is going to be leading the workshop. He is over in the College of Nursing and has created this really fantastic collaborative mapping model that involves using course mapping to align your outcomes and assessments in your courses. So that's what he's going to be talking about today. Before we get started, just a couple of upcoming things you may be interested in. Next week on Friday at 9 a.m. here, we have a Snagit workshop, which is Snagit's a sort of screen capturing and annotating software, and everyone who comes to the workshop gets a license. So if you're interested in Snagit, pop on by at 9 a.m. next week and get a license and learn how to use it. We also have a couple other things. You may be interested. We have an online teaching strategy session that we've been doing that's about creating presence in your course. The next one of those will be here on April 21st. We also in May have a Canvas for face-to-face courses. I know there's a few folks here who teach face-to-face. We're doing a session on how you can use Canvas in your face-to-face course on May 5th, and then on the 18th we have our CU Online Spring Symposium that's going to be over in the Student Services Building, and it's a ton of fun. We have some great speakers and a keynote address. We're looking at sort of virtual reality and virtual world is the theme of our keynote this year, sort of how that ties into higher education. So, and then this summer we have instructional design camp. We are doing a 3-day intense camp that is surrounds instructional design. We're going to do some course mapping and then sort of jump off from there. And the purpose is that everyone who attends is going to leave sort of as an instructional designer. That's the idea, and there's a stipend that goes along with that. If you're an online faculty member, you're eligible to apply for the grant money that goes with that you can use, $750 toward anything instructionally design related, which is sort of a loose designation there. So if you have any questions about any of that, let me know. For now, I'll pass it off to Jason, and welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you all for coming. So if my voice is a little shaky at times, it's because I'm just getting over a cold. So sorry in advance if I sound a little raspy. I'm Jason Drysdale, the manager of instructional design for the College of Nursing. And we'll be walking through kind of a process together today of either evaluating your existing course or designing a new course. Ideally in a collaborative capacity with an instructional designer, but there's some transferable skills here that will also be useful if you're doing your work independently. So how many of you have seen or like or now hate after the finale How I Met Your Mother, the TV show? A couple people? Okay, so the main character, Ted Mosby, he's an architect, and he gets to build this crazy building in New York to kind of influence the New York skyline. And he's the youngest guy who's ever done it, blah, blah, blah. And so he wakes up in the middle of the night one night freaking out that he's gonna mess up this project. And he tells one of his close friends this story about a library at a university where the architect who was designing it forgot to account for the weight of the books when he built the building. So slowly over time, the library sunk down into the ground and had to become condemned. And he looks over at his friend and he says, what if I forget all the books? What am I going to do? So it's kind of like this acknowledgement of fear around all of the details that go into managing this project that he's got going on, and just the gravity of that responsibility and experience. So we're not all architects, clearly. Some of us might be, right? But designing your own course, building your own course, teaching, there's so many details that go into it that it can often feel the same sense of fear or frustration or concern to make sure that you're doing everything you need to for your students and for yourself to set yourself up well. So this model, the collaborative mapping model, I designed it to kind of fill the void between existing instructional design models that's really focused on relationship rather than on product, and working together to produce something so that we don't forget all of the books, both literally and figuratively in this regard, right? So our goal for today is to create a collaborative course map, and the outcome is to target meaningful design changes in your course. So we'll talk a little bit later about the differences between goals and outcomes, which will hopefully become a bit more apparent as we work through the mapping model as well. But for today, those are the things that we'll be focusing on. So we'll jump right into this piece of it, the logistical piece, picking the right tool. The tool that I'm suggesting we use today is called bubble.us, bubbl.us. And if you missed the link that was up before, I'll post it again just here in a few minutes before we start some of the workshopping time. But there are a ton of tools out there. There's a Mashable article and several others that kind of walk through all of the different options that are available for doing flowcharts and mapping and mind mapping, that sort of thing. So I picked a few to kind of highlight to see which one resonates with you and kind of tell you why the one that I've been using has been working well for me. So this is Poplit. This is the only one of the 4 tools that I'm going to show you today that has a mobile app, and I think it's on Android and iPhone and iPad, all platforms. And it's super easy to use on iPad. So if you're the kind of person who wants to be doing your work, your conceptual work on your course on the go, this is a really good option for you. It's also the only one that has the ability to tag each individual bubble with the person's name who's been editing or working on it most recently. So if you're working together on a map with another faculty member or with an instructional designer, this can be a good way to kind of do revision history, keep track of what changes have been made on your map, and just know kind of who contributed what to the map as a whole. So Poplit is probably my second favorite of these. It's a really useful tool. This one's called Coggle. It's very different. Its benefit is that it connects with Google Drive, so you can save all of your maps right to Google Drive, which is super useful. But it doesn't have the kind of flexibility that a lot of the other tools have. It uses these lines exclusively, and you can organize it whichever way you want, but it can be a little hard to see relationship and comparison of different elements using this tool, so I'm a little less, I think it's a little less useful, but it's a good option for the convenience of connecting with Google, for sure. Next is SpiderScribe. I tend to think this looks like it's from the Windows XP era, so it's a little outdated, but it's a pretty useful tool. So it has much of the same functionality and flexibility as the other tools do. It's a little less bright and vivid in terms of the colors, and the arrows that you can draw are a little more restrictive. But it's a pretty good tool as well. And then this is the one that we'll be using today, bubble.us. Other than how vibrant it looks and that the developers are pretty open to listening to people's feedback and integrating some of that to the tool, my favorite thing about it for me is that I can manage a really large number of maps, even if they're shared with other people, in a pretty easy way. It's got great search tools. It lets you file things in a really nice, familiar structure. They don't have a mobile app, but their web browser version of it is passable, at least for viewing maps, that sort of thing. So it's a very useful tool. I manage somewhere around 150 to 200 of these in our college that I have at any given point. So I needed something where I could find everything quickly, and this lets me do that very easily. So it's definitely a good tool. So before we get into bubble.us and I walk you through what the course map structure looks like, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the value of creating a map like this. So these maps they're evaluative tools that exist outside of the LMS, so it's easier to be a little bit objective. We've all looked at syllabi. You pour your time, your hearts, your souls into those documents, and over time, those documents can become a relic of so much history that it's difficult to look at your course in an objective capacity and evaluate it for what it's actually doing for your students and with your students. So this is just a nice way to kind of take a step back from your syllabus and say, okay, what am I actually doing in my course? What are the things that I say I'm doing? Are they having the effect, or are they playing the role in my students' experience that they're supposed to be playing? So it just helps you kind of step back a little bit from what you've built over time and say, let's take a look at this in a different capacity and see how it's working. I also like to create a visual representation of this information because it's easier to see themes emerge. So just like it's challenging to take an Excel spreadsheet full of research data and make sense of it without doing it into some graphs or some sort of visual representation, it can be challenging to make those connections with your course as well. So what we're looking at is a system of connected pieces that all contribute to some cohesive transformation you're hoping to see in students, right? So producing this in a visual capacity, again, gives you a broader sense of what's going on, more tools to evaluate things, and hopefully just gives you a better sense of understanding of what's going on in your course. Another really positive element of doing a map like this is working with an instructional designer. Obviously, I'm a little biased because that's what I do, but it might be counterintuitive, but sometimes connecting with someone who's less familiar with your content or even with your discipline can bring a fresh perspective to what you do. I work in the College of Nursing. I have for 3 years now. I've only been in the hospital when, my wife was about to give birth, and I have no idea about anything about nursing and don't really care to because it's not what I'm interested in. But I sit down with my faculty and I listen to their stories and their passion, and it helps me feel connected with their work and with their students in a way that makes me excited to design with them. And that relationship, I ask questions sometimes that they won't think about, and they bring a perspective that I would never consider either. And so the hope is that by sitting down in a format that's shared, that's maybe a little less familiar to everybody until we get everything put into place and can kind of look at it together, it gives us some equal footing and a chance to look at things together from a different angle. So that can be really a powerful thing for your course, for your students, and for your teaching as well. Another really important piece of it, and then we'll move on to, I'll show you a map that we've developed in the college as an example, and then we'll start playing around with the tool, and I'll walk around and kind of show you how things work. Another really powerful thing is the ability to save time in the design process so that you can invest that time in some of the other elements of your teaching. So it might seem a little counterintuitive, again, that you're doing extra work to design your course outside of your syllabus format. But this can save you a lot of time in the design process because things emerge more readily in this format than they do in the other. All right, let me pull up a course map really quick here. So another nice thing about bubble.us is if your entire department wants to use this tool for course mapping or any other system, they have like group licenses available that allow your IT team to centrally manage and send accounts to people. It's pretty reasonable in cost, gives you a dedicated domain extension here. Like I said, it's just a super useful tool for managing a large number of projects. So here's all my maps here. So let's find, this is a doctoral epistemology course that I developed a couple of years back with one of our faculty. Okay, good, you can see it pretty well. Just let me know if it's hard to see it in the back and I'll zoom in and we can kind of look at it a bit closer. So the basic structure of the course map is obviously title and your tech requirements and course description up top, just to kind of keep the higher level stuff that you need to consider in perspective. And have you all heard of the term backwards design? It's kind of a buzzword. I'm sure you've heard it thrown around at least once or twice. We do use backwards design to create the course maps. However, they're written from the student's perspective for a couple of reasons. One, it helps you as faculty consider what your students are doing from their perspective rather from your own. So it helps you consider the flow and structure of what they're learning in a different frame of reference, which can be a valuable way to see some new themes emerge. And the other is it's a useful way to kind of evaluate your outcomes in a different capacity. So the green row at the top, these are weekly topics. So I encourage my faculty to organize your course in terms of weeks rather than in terms of modules, primarily because your students will experience your course every week. So if you have one module that's spread out over 3 weeks, that's difficult for them to understand the expectations each week. Whereas this way we can say, yeah, we've got 2 weeks on ways of knowing, but we're structuring it that there's week 1 and week 2 sort of specific expectations for each of those weeks in kind. So we can still invest as much time as you need to on each topic. Just it helps you keep the expectations for your students clear and gives us the tools we need to evaluate those elements from their perspective more readily. So that's the green row, just topics by week, pretty basic. The orange row here, these are all readings, videos, and lectures. Anything students will either, it's knowledge and content acquisition, or it's in-class time activities that are not graded. So anything that's reading, video, lecture, discussion, anything that's not graded really goes in this orange row here. And this can be a challenge for some people to fit all of the readings and stuff they have for a single week into one of these smaller bubbles. So we try to use as many abbreviations as we can. And we'll get to that evaluative component a little later too, to talk about workload calculation and sort of balance of activities in each week, how this can help you look at that. So that's the orange row. The yellow row here is all graded activities or assignments, whatever nomenclature you prefer to use. So the reason we've got these on the bottom here is so that we can align them directly with the last element here on the bottom, which are the outcomes for your course. We can't really measure content in terms of outcomes. They don't give us an opportunity to see student proficiency or growth. So the best way to evaluate your students and to map toward those outcomes is through the actual activities that they complete, rather than the content or the weekly topics that they're addressing. So all of these arrows, these are pointing, so this assignment and this assignment meet this first outcome here. This one meets here, this one meets here, that sort of thing. So it gives you an opportunity to see a holistic, sort of large-scale look at what your course is doing. And then we can look at a few criteria that maybe you might not consider most of the time when you're doing evaluation outside of a visual format like this. Any questions? You're welcome to ask questions anytime, by the way. I'm happy to answer anything you may have. Cool. Well, if not right now, if you're all interested, open up your computers. If you haven't, log into bubble.us. I'll pull up that link one more time and start playing around. The template you probably can't edit, but if you pull it up, it'll give you sort of an example of what the course mapping structure looks like, so that when you go into bubble.us, you can start building on your own and kind of learn the tool like that.
And if you need help, just holler. We're both here to help you.
Yeah, we'll take maybe 15 minutes or so to. Cool. So if everybody's ready to move on, let's walk through a few of the evaluative criteria that are easier to see through the mapping model than they are on like the syllabus or something like that. These are pieces that I've seen faculty tend to miss just because it's not stuff that's readily apparent in your syllabus. So the first one, we're starting off with probably the most contentious of the bunch. It's workload calculation. So this could be its own presentation, and I'm sure for some people it is its own presentation. We're just going to hit on it very briefly. And if you want some more information about it later, let me know. I've got some resources I can share with you. But as you know, credit hours are calculated as 1 contact hour and 2 homework hours per credit hour per week. That's sort of that's the definition of the Carnegie unit for 1 credit hour. It's 1 hour of lecture or in-class time and 2 hours of homework per credit hour per week. So for a standard 15-week course, 3 credits, 3 credit hours, right? You'd have 9 hours of work each week. Student work, student expected work. And that's defined as sort of the minimum threshold for student effort to associate with each credit hour. The challenge becomes if we go significantly above that, we can devalue our students' work by making them do more and earning fewer credit hours associated with their time. And also we hit cognitive overload issues. So if we overload our students, then they're doing maybe very broad work, but they're not gaining deep knowledge and they're not moving all of that information to long-term memory, that sort of thing. So workload calculation is a really important part of evaluating your course, seeing how much time you're investing in readings, how much time you're giving your students or expecting your students to do in activities or test taking or studying, those sorts of things. So by mapping, it gives us an opportunity to kind of look at the balance of the time your students invest doing passive learning activities and active learning activities. The hard part, yeah, please.
Is there some idea as to what a standard amount of pages a student can read in X amount of time?
You're ahead of me.
Oh.
There it is. So this is something I did anecdotally after, I've designed around 500, I think, courses now over the last 5 years or so. But there are also workload calculators like this that are funded from other universities that you can find as well. And Amy, you found a really good one, right?
Yeah, Rice University has a great
Rice,
one.
yeah.
I'll send a link to that to you all as well and follow up.
Right, so this is it's been corroborated by a lot of people who do this sort of evaluative work, this piece of it. Technical reading is essentially textbook reading. So anything where your students have lots of terms to research and look up on Wikipedia, if you're me, when you're first finding a term, and graphs to explore, a glossary, anything like that that's really, really heavy, kind of heady stuff, is about 10 pages an hour. That includes note-taking, like I said, looking up terms, everything that goes around with reading those 10 pages and understanding them, that would be what that hour comes to. Non-technical reading, that would be, stuff like prose, story-driven, so narrative reading, anything that's written at more of a popular level, so that would be around 20 pages an hour. Reflective writing, so sometimes we call assignments reflective when they're actually analytical. So be looking at what you mean by reflection. Reflection is really, I'm applying my experience to a set of circumstances or information so that I can connect with it on both a personal and a cognitive level. So reflection is really, what does this mean to me? How am I encountering it? Where analysis is, let me look at what other people are doing and give you sort of an opinion or a judgment about their work, separated from me. So that kind of writing, reflective, is about a page per hour. It's quicker because it's from our experience. It's not from external analysis work. Research writing, this would include research time, finding sources, organizing sources, all of that stuff. 1 page per 2 to 3 hours. That probably looks a little bit scary if you've got 5-page research, papers in your course. But we'll look at that a little bit later too. And then online discussions, I usually say 1 whole discussion, including a main post and a couple of responses here and there, takes about 2 hours of time. If you're writing your discussions as discussions and not as sort of small-scale papers that the students are replying to with lots of citations and that sort of thing.
What about Zoom discussions?
Zoom discussions, I usually just measure at the total duration of time that I expect students to participate. So
an hour?
Yeah, so I set it ahead of time. Let's do a 1-hour Zoom session, and then, anything like that, videos, they're pretty easy because it's just the time lapse, the total time.
They have to prepare for it, like if you give them like a preparation, questions to be able to answer,
Yeah.
Still 1 hour?
I would say 1 hour, and then you can look at if it's discussion type questions that you're asking them to prep for. You might look at the online discussions as a frame of reference. I think the tool from Rice and a few others have additional assignment types that you might be able to explore too. This was sort of the ones that I see most regularly in our courses. So.
And then
Yeah.
on the pages,
Yeah.
reflective writing, 1 page per hour, is that considered like 500 words or?
Yeah, your
They
typical
like-
APA
Yeah,
kind of 1 page.
1 page
So.
is 500, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. What was your
I
question?
have a question I'm sure you don't know the answer to, but I'm asking.
Sure.
I teach Spanish. Do you have any idea for foreign language? Or do you know if it's on the rice page?
I don't know if it is on the rice page, but it's a good question, and it definitely relates to this in a way that I think will be, hopefully relatable to everybody. And that is, as faculty members, when you're considering how much time it takes to read these things, you're probably reading it through your own lens, your own experience. And you're experts. You know this stuff inside and out. Your students are often encountering this material for the first time, even if they've got some experience in this field. They may be this, hopefully will be completely new stuff to them each time they go about it. So the numbers may seem a little high at first glance, but that's because these are new. This is new information, new experiences that your students are getting when they encounter this stuff for the first time. So I think that would be relevant to foreign languages in every discipline, really.
So Jason, when you
Yeah.
say activity guideline, would this, like say 1 week, we
Mhm.
have the topic,
Mhm.
and then we're calculating our assigned readings
Mhm.
with this format in mind, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
assignment videos, viewings.
you bet. So let me go back to this map here. So when I take a look at workload calculation, first thing is this is not to nickel and dime you or your students to death. This is not to say you have to fit into this very strict structure, this strict mold. It's to give you a sense of what you're expecting of your students, because we don't really capture that very often. So it's not so much you have to hit 9 hours every week or you can't go above 9 hours every week. It's more, okay, if we're expecting 9 hours or maybe 12 hours this first week when it's really content heavy, maybe we'll give some time, a little bit more flexibility in week 2 for them to absorb that information, maybe apply it. So it's just more information that you can use to structure your course and the activities intentionally. So yeah, what we tend to do is, after we've got a complete map, this first one is chapters 1 through 5 of reflective practice, and then an introduction video for the class. So this we don't have a specific measure on. I would probably estimate for an introduction video 30 to 45 minutes, something like that. If you've got students needing to do 1 or 2 takes, kids are screaming in the background, you got to start over. Give them some extra leeway there. But then, 5 chapters, if these are, 10 to 15 pages per chapter, we're pretty handily under the 9 hours. And this is an 8-week course, so they actually have more like 18 hours that they can do that week. So being under doesn't mean that you're undervalued. You're not giving your students enough. It means you've hit the scope of work for that week, and you're giving your students some time to process. Giving students time to process should be a part of our instructional design. It needs to be, because they need that time.
To answer your question about foreign language, I'm not finding a calculator that does foreign language. You can, on the RICE one, choose the difficulty and the purpose, like whether they're just looking over it or really engaging with it, and that may help get closer, but that would be an interesting research project.
Yeah, you bet.
Well,
Totally.
At least in Denver, we've got an item in our FCQs
Mhm.
that report the hours you spend on the course.
Mhm.
So, you can always sort of, I think students I suspect they overestimate the amount of time they spend on their courses.
Yeah.
But you can always kind of look and gauge, on a semester to semester.
Yeah, you bet. I think you're probably right. I think they're, and this is designed to be at sort of the average time expectancy for students. So you're going to have students who will fly through your work a lot quicker. They're not going to take an hour to read 10 pages. They'll take an hour to read 30. And you'll also have students that they'll be spending more time than this in the
Yeah, I
course.
teach GIS, which is technical,
Yeah,
and that just moves the variation.
yeah, I'm sure it's.
You've got kids who sort of hack browsers and kids who are afraid of zip files in the same
Right, in the same class, yeah, you bet. And so this can help you give just a basic measure of that information, and Of course, all of these things, like I said, they're not hard and fast. Your expertise and your experience as a faculty member should be informing all of this information. So if you look at the measurement and you're like, I don't think that's quite right. I think they can handle a little more this week. Follow your instincts and then stick with that and see how it works. Do some analysis of that and see if your expectation was accurate. You can ask your students. There are a lot of ways to get at that. It gives us a good baseline to start building from. Any other questions on workload calculation before we move on? We can certainly revisit this later too.
So you want to figure out your assignments on this formula relatively so,
Yeah, a general impression. That's why I called it a guideline rather than a rule. It's supposed to give you a general impression of what your students are doing week to week. Cool. I'm sure you've heard this all the time. I couldn't resist doing a Picard meme here. Engage your students is something we hear all the time. Student engagement, that's what it's all about. And in my view, the best way to engage your students is to have a stable, purposeful design in place before you start your course so that you can invest your time teaching, working with them, and especially in an online course, integrating your presence in a way that can influence their learning in a positive way. So how many of you have used or seen Twitter used in a course before? I've seen it used in a course I think like maybe once, maybe twice. And the reason for that is it's a cool technology. People are like, cool, everybody's using Twitter. Let's use Twitter. It must be a good tool if people are using it, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a specific instructional use for that tool. It could be that you're just using it because your students, you think your students will like it. But if there's no discernible, definable value for using that, then it's not a good integration of technology. So this next criteria we're going to look at is purposeful design. This is very clearly that each activity, each decision you make in your course has a clear purpose to it. That students can look at it and know that there's value associated with what they're doing. And you can look at it in context of your whole course and say, this is doing something meaningful to move my students toward those outcomes, whether it's transformation focused and you want to see some change in what they know and who they are, or if it's more associated with skill development, that it's moving them toward those in an intentional way. So pretty regularly when I build a course map with a faculty member, I like to ask them a simple question about a learning activity or a video, any of those yellow items on the map, right? And I like to ask, can you share with me why you made this decision for your course? A lot of the time, the answer is, well, I just thought I should. They needed to write a paper, or maybe it's, well, presentation skills are important for our students to learn so they can present at conferences, or maybe it's they need to learn test-taking skills, or there's so much knowledge that I need to see if they understand that we had to do a test. Usually what this means is, the answers revolve around the content rather than the instructional purpose for it. So they need to know all of this information. This is foundational knowledge. So it focuses more on content rather than on context or on what the students are actually doing to demonstrate mastery. So when we address the instructional purpose of these design decisions that you make in your courses, like why are students taking a test here? How does this presentation reinforce the content and context you want to share? The answers tend to get a little bit more murky. And that's not a bad thing. It just tells us that that's an opportunity to strengthen that design decision. So you've probably all heard this before. We teach the way we were taught, or we teach the way we want to learn, right? So we teach from our own experience or perspective rather than the perspective of our students. I would add a third one to that, and it's we teach the way we think our students want to learn. So the scientists struggle with this a lot. We have a lot of students who come into our programs who are really used to test taking and lectures, and they love it because they know they're good at it. They know how to do it. And when we go in and say, we're going to switch up your learning experience to be an active learning model where you have to come to class having read everything, and we're going to do case-based discussions, that can be pretty jarring for some of our students. They can get kind of frustrated about it. The thing is, we're not designing just for the satisfaction of our students. We're designing for their growth, for their learning. And that's something you as a faculty member has a unique perspective on that they don't. The satisfaction is a part of student engagement, but it's a very small part. There are a lot of other elements that go into students being successful beyond just, I liked it or I didn't. So when you look at those decisions in your course, think through the lens of what's positive disruption for my students? What decisions can I make here that will help them connect with the content in ways that they haven't experienced before? Maybe they won't always love it the first time, but that it will transform their experience of that material in new ways. So with that in mind, we'll go back to the map here. Take a look at this yellow row. And you can take a look at it and say, okay, am I doing discussions every single week? Are my discussion questions in the same mold every week? How many papers am I expecting my students to write? And then maybe, okay, we've got a paper in week 4. Is that the best format for it? It's a reflective sort of activity, so maybe it would be better served as a video than a paper, so I can get a sense of immediacy from them rather than the more planned, thought out approach to writing. When you look at things, not just does it support the content or does it not, and you think of what is my student's experience with this specific activity, it gives you a lot more information about what design decisions you're making and maybe could or should make for your course. Yeah, so that is purposeful design. The next criteria we'll get to, we'll just do this one now, is outcome alignment. This is a pretty big one and can be pretty time consuming. Outcomes alignment is straightforward in principle, but it usually takes a lot of time to do it the right way. By connecting your learning activities to their corresponding outcomes, you identify gaps and overlaps in your course. You can see that both in your learning activities and in the outcomes themselves. So this is a good opportunity not just to say, are my assignments doing what they should be doing in the course, but also, are my outcomes accurately descriptive of my students' experience for this course? So it goes both directions here. So it can have a few results. One, assignments that meet no outcomes can be redesigned. It's an opportunity to say, okay, maybe it's not fitting what I thought it should, how I thought it should fit in my course. Let's take a look at it again. Outcomes that have no assignments can be reconsidered. If you've got something, just an outlier out there, that's not connecting anything, that's probably means something. It's either not written to the level or to the type of content that you're really using in your course, or maybe it's a skills-focused outcome and you're really looking for something transformation-focused, that students can look at the change they're seeing in themselves rather than a specific skill that they've advanced. And then the third one is reevaluate the quality of your outcomes. So if you look at your outcomes and you're trying to align all of your assignments to them, and you're like, well, I can't really measure that outcome with any of my assignments, then that's an opportunity to redesign it as well. And that happens pretty often. The word understand, you see it in a ton of objectives or outcomes. How do we measure understanding? Most of the time people say, well, I took a test and they got the test questions right, so they understood the material. Well, that shows comprehension, but it doesn't show understanding. So if you're looking at, the Bloom's taxonomy verbs, what are some of those things that are demonstrably measurable? That you can have your assignments point to them and say, I know my students are getting this because I've seen it in the work that they've produced. So those are kind of the three primary ways that I evaluate outcomes in courses, and use outcomes to evaluate how assignments are functioning in a course. That's kind of a quick tagline: redesign, reconsider, reevaluate. Redesign your activities if you need to, reconsider your outcomes in context of your assignments, and reevaluate your outcomes if they're not being met. Okay, so goals, objectives, competencies, outcomes. You've probably heard all of those used interchangeably at your college or at a conference or something else, right? They're not the same thing. First of all, competencies, there's a big trend in higher ed right now toward competency-based education. This is a completely different model of accreditation, of accrediting your programs as a replacement to the credit hour system. So when you say your students are meeting competencies, that means something totally different now than just a skills-focused approach to course development. So I like to put these in 3 categories. Competencies, they're skills-focused, but in a very specific modality for your degrees. Goals and objectives, they're task-oriented. So they're tasks to complete, information to know, experiences to have. It's the what am I doing of your course. And then outcomes are, what can I do now? How have I changed? How will my career be impacted? So outcomes are the change you see or the change you elicit in your students as the result of the work that they do. So the example I like to use of this is, especially now that it's around hiking season, is losing weight. I love hiking. I want to go up to the mountains and be able to not be super out of breath by the time I, hit, whatever elevation. So I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna lose weight. Losing weight in itself is my goal, right? It's not the outcome. I might lose 15 pounds, but the outcome is now I can go on a hike without getting out of breath, or I can go play with my kid in the backyard and feel really good about it, or my knees hurt less, So that's a good sort of analysis of what goals and outcomes are. Goals are what you do. Outcomes is how you're different. In my college, I encourage us to write outcomes because I think generally they speak more to what's happening in our courses in a substantive way. Goals are often interchangeable with the assignments that you're doing, so they point toward those outcomes. Is this helpful?
Yes.
Okay. Here are just some very brief tips for writing outcomes. And then we'll have about, I think, 20 minutes left for me to walk around and help you if you're plugging information in on a map and you want to, or if you have any other questions about this stuff, either for the group or individually, I'd be happy to share. So tips, be brief. Lists are a bad thing in your outcomes. Don't have lots of lists in your outcomes because it makes them really, really challenging to measure. Use strong verbs up front in your outcomes. Another one on that, don't use 2 verbs because 2 verbs makes it harder to measure as well. So don't say demonstrate and understand, just pick one. We see that a lot too. And it's not intentional, it's just, it's oftentimes a brainstorming session, which is number 3, don't accept your first draft. It's never good enough, I guarantee you. You'll want to strengthen it. Yeah.
I would say just don't use the word understand.
Yes, please don't use the word understand. And demonstrate for that matter. I picked 2 examples that I don't like. Yeah. Because demonstrate it's a yes or a no, right? You did or you didn't. There's no degree of proficiency in there. So. And then last, articulate the change that you expect to see in your students. So by the time they're done here, how do you anticipate them being different? So this is more workshopping time. I had to get a picture of my dog Kingsley in there because I love dogs, couldn't help it. Some question slides too. Here's my contact info. I'll walk around in the next 15-20 minutes if we don't have any questions for everybody here. I am always happy to connect. I know Amy is as well, and Sarah. We've got 2 awesome instructional designers now here at CU Online that I know would love to connect with you with creating a course map and doing some design work together.
And my email's up on that other screen, actually.
Oh, perfect.
So.
Yeah, please.